You know, the whole topic of head coverings in the Bible, it can be really confusing, right? It just feels so ancient, so out of place in our world. But what if the way we usually think about it is completely 100% backward? We're about to unpack the puzzle behind this symbol, and I'm telling you, the answer is probably not what you're expecting.
All right, so here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll ask if this symbol has been misunderstood all along. Then, we'll jump back in time to the Roman world to get some context. From there, we'll look at the new instruction that was actually for men, then uncover the surprising meaning of the symbol for women, and finally, see how it all played out in worship. So let's kick things off with that first big question. Is this a symbol we've misunderstood? Because, most of the time when this comes up, the conversation is all about women, but it's so important to remember the original text was talking to both men and women.
And that really gets to the heart of what we're exploring today. Was this just a rule for women to follow, or was something much, much deeper going on here? A symbol that meant something for the entire church. Let's dig in.
Okay, for our second section, we have to talk about the first century Roman context. To make any sense of this, we've got to transport ourselves back to that world, because the early Christians were doing something that was a radical break from the culture all around them.
You see, in the pagan Roman world, it was totally normal for both men and women to cover their heads during religious ceremonies. It was just a sign of being pious and respectful. So naturally, when the Christian church started, some folks just kept doing what they'd always done. But the Apostle Paul steps in and introduces a really sharp break from that tradition.
And this brings us to a part of the story that is so often overlooked. Section 3, A New Truth for Men. Because the very first command on this topic wasn't for women to cover their heads, it was for men to uncover theirs.
So, why the big change? Well, men were told to uncover their heads to make a huge statement. It was a clear, visual break from paganism. It basically screamed, "Christ is my head, not some Roman idol." And it showed that they were reflecting His glory and getting their authority directly from Him.
And this is the question that trips everybody up. Okay, so if the point was to be different from the pagan culture and men were told to stop covering their heads, why on earth were Christian women told to keep doing it? The answer is, well, it's completely counterintuitive.
The answer is in our fourth section, what we're calling Authority's Surprising Symbol, because this wasn't about being passive or silent. According to the source material we're looking at, this was actually a sign of power.
Now, to get this, we have to understand the theological framework that's being set up here, this idea of a divine flow of authority. It goes from God to Christ to man and then to woman. This order is the absolute key to the whole thing because it establishes where a person's authority is coming from.
And here is the absolute bombshell. The source material argues the head covering wasn't for everyday life. It wasn't about silence. It was a very specific symbol for a very specific moment, when a woman was publicly praying or prophesying. In other words, when she was actively using her God-given spiritual authority in front of men.
I mean, the source material poses this exact question. It asks if it's precisely because women have spiritual authority over men that they need to have a symbol of head covering. So in this view, the covering isn't about being quiet. It's about being active. It's directly tied to her using her spiritual gifts.
So that leads us to our final section, validating prophecy in worship. Okay, if the covering was a symbol of her authority, how did that actually work? How did it, function to validate her words in front of everyone?
Well, by wearing that covering while she prophesied, a woman was making a really powerful statement. She was showing everyone, and this includes the spiritual beings they believe were present, that her authority came straight from God, and she was operating correctly within His structure. It was a sign that she wasn't being rebellious or trying to grab power, and that in turn gave her prophecy incredible credibility.
So, far from silencing her, the symbol actually made her voice louder. It was like her credentials, the thing that said, "Hey, listen up. What I'm about to say isn't just my opinion, this is from God." It made sure that her powerful words were received the right way by the whole church.
And all of this really leaves us with one big question to think about. This whole thing hinges on context, doesn't it? Without understanding the culture and the theology, a symbol of validated spiritual power can get twisted into a tool of oppression. It just makes you wonder, what other symbols might we be misunderstanding today simply because we've lost their original context?